Okay, hi, my name is Jon Allen. I'm a patient and friend of Lisa Wong, and I'm here to share my story as I'm going through my first experiences with the, uh, the gallbladder and liver flush and changes to my diet and lifestyle. This started throughout my whole life. I've been athletic. I was on the swimming and water polo and cross country teams starting when I was 6, 7 years old, all the way through college. And I coached swimming and water polo all the way through my 30s, mid 30s. So I've been highly athletic throughout my whole life. I've typically been, when I was in high school, I was 175 pounds. When I was in college, I was 85 pounds. And I was always in very good shape, ate a ton. I think when I was in high school, I would eat up to 10 to 15,000 calories a day being on the swim team. And so throughout my life, my challenges have been trying to find athletic things to do that are different from swimming, and then also changing my diet as I get older and then doing less athletic activities. So one thing I noticed about a year ago, as I was out running, I started getting cramps in my legs, and I noticed that every time I would go out for a run, within the first half mile or so, my calves would cramp to the point where I couldn't continue, and it would take a week or so for them to clear. And I tried all sorts of typical sports medicine techniques to fix this. I hydrated a lot before and after. I would use compression sleeves, I would use sports creams. Nothing worked. Anytime I would start to run, I would get a cramp in my legs. I first assumed this was a fitness issue and changed what athletics I was doing. So I would walk and hike instead of running. I would do elliptical and biking. But anytime I would try running again, I would get the same issue. And I still had issues where I would have cramps in my legs at night, or it wasn't going away. I was just avoiding the problem. And then about 6 months after that issue had started, I was doing some videos with Lisa in her office about some self-exams with your ears, or some couples exams that you can do with each other. And after we finished those videos, she did an exam on me and told me that she was seeing early signs of gout in my system, which completely shocked me because none of my family had ever told me anything about gout ever being an issue. So that was a bit disconcerting, and I started doing research on gout and what it is. That led me down the path of diabetes, because all the things that I'd read about gout were things that I don't typically do. I'd never have drank alcohol. I'd stopped eating red meat a couple of years ago. I still consumed a lot of white meat and occasionally fish, but the big problem I'd always had was too much carbohydrate and sugar. I enjoyed chocolate and ice cream too much, apparently. So as I was researching gout, it took me down the path towards diabetes, which my grandfather had, but he was also way overweight. My theory was that maybe the gout was a symptom of some early cardiovascular disease caused by too much sugar, which raised the glucose level in my blood and caused hardening of the arteries, which then led to inability to filter the uric acid, which caused gout. That was my logical process. And so that pushed me to trying the gallbladder flush that Lisa had told me about during the exam. I'd been interested in it, and when she told me about the flush, I ordered a copy of the book, but I had just been reading it and preparing myself for it, and after doing this research, I decided, okay, let's give this a go. Can't hurt. Let's see what happens. And so the first time I did the flush was July 4th weekend. I On the first time that I did it, I prepared for it according to the book. I drank cherry juice for the week beforehand, didn't change my diet too much until the Wednesday before, and then tried to keep a vegetarian diet the last couple of days before the flush. And then on the day of the flush, I drank the first, 12 ounces or whatever. Then the second, didn't have any effects, didn't feel anything. Then I drank the grapefruit juice and olive oil mix and went to bed. Woke up the next morning, had the third volume of the Epsom salt, and then I started to feel effects in my system. Went through the whole flush throughout that day. That was Sunday, I guess. I did it Saturday night. So fortunately, it was July 4th weekend. I had an extra day because I didn't prepare properly. I hadn't done it before, so I didn't really know what to expect. And so I went through the whole process through the Sunday. I had a home enema kit that I was using as well to help after because the Epsom salt works for 4 or 5 hours and then it really stops doing its thing. And Lisa had warned me about making sure that you continue to flush your system to make sure that any gallstones that are released come out. So I continued to use my home enema kit for the rest of the weekend until I saw no more gallstones. And then I went back to my normal lifestyle, felt very good. One of the things I noticed was after about a week or so, I tried riding my bike into work again. One of the issues I'd had riding my bike into work was that I was feeling numbness in my legs and in my feet, and that I would get saddle sores really bad, and also my wrists were hurting. And I'd also noticed numbness when doing elliptical. After about a half hour or so, my feet would start getting numb. So after doing the flush, I decided to give the bike a go again. I rode into work. It's about a 7-mile trip each way, so a 14-mile round trip. Had no pain in my feet, no numbness in my feet, no pain in my wrists. Felt great. Rode home. I didn't feel saddle sores on the way home. Normally, if you haven't been on a bike in a while and you hop back on, you feel sore the next day or after the first ride. I didn't feel anything. I rode my bike into work 3 times that week, I think, and felt nothing except perfectly fine and energetic. So I was very excited that it seemed to have cleared up whatever issues I was having with circulation that I was attributing towards poor circulation due to maybe a diabetes issue. But my circulation or whatever issues I was having had cleared up, and I started going on to a every other day vegetarian diet as I tried to work my way into a more vegetable-based protein diet. So continued that for about a month. I kind of got a little lazy with the diet, and I noticed after about a month, after a large meal I had with some friends, I started feeling pain in my gut area. It felt very much like stomach cramp, like my whole stomach was cramping up. I felt very uncomfortable. It came on a couple of hours after we finished dinner and lasted for an hour, hour and a half. I thought it was just due to the volume of food because I'd actually had quite a bit. It was very good, and I went back for seconds. Thinking, I'll just hop on my bike and get rid of it, right? So then I noticed the same thing would happen occasionally after a meal. I would start feeling soreness throughout my entire stomach. For the first few times this happened, I attributed it towards volume. I thought, okay, if I reduce my volume, spread my meals out over time versus having a large meal, that will make this go away. But I noticed that it was actually becoming more intense when it would happen, and quickly determined by feeling around, because my whole gut would hurt, but if I pressed underneath the rib here where the gallbladder is, there was a sharp pain. And so I quickly noticed that even if I had a small amount of meat, like or animal-based protein, like one egg or a piece of bacon or something like that, I would start to feel it. And so I realized that what must be happening is that I have an obstruction And that's one thing that the book does mention, is that after you do the first flush, or after you do any flush actually, the stones will still be moving. Any stones that are still in your gallbladder will still be moving around. And so you can get an obstruction between flushes. And that seemed to be what had happened, was that I had an obstruction in one of the bile ducts, and that after eating anything meat-based, a couple of hours after eating, I would start to feel pain, and I felt it in my whole gut, and actually after a couple of weeks, my whole body I just felt horrible. I felt like I was going to die. It would last for, depending on how much I had, half hour to a couple hours, and then it would just suddenly stop. So it was whenever the bile stopped trying to come out, I would stop feeling the pain. The worst instance lasted about 8 hours, and that was after a rather large meal. And so once I figured out, yes, this is indeed an obstruction, I went to a fully vegetarian diet and said, okay, I'm going to do another flush next weekend, as soon as I could cycle around. Since I'd done it before, I knew what I was getting myself into. I planned to do it on a Friday night so I could have all weekend to recover. I started my cherry juice on a Sunday, went fully vegetarian for the week leading up to the flush. On the last day, I fasted, so I had nothing but water. And then on Friday night, started the flush. After the 6 o'clock dose of the Epsom salt, I started feeling effects right away, instantly. I was within an hour. So instead of being a 12-hour delay like the first one, this one started right away. So it seemed like the whole schedule had pushed up about 12 hours, because I had the 6 o'clock and the 8 o'clock. I did go to bed at 10. I had to get up a couple of times during the night, but then everything calmed down a little bit around midnight. And then got up at 6 as normal, completed the flush, and continued using the home enema kit. But everything cleared out by the end of the day. I actually went to a play Saturday night that weekend. Then on Sunday, I wanted to test to see if the flush had worked, and so I intentionally went to a restaurant and had a big chicken meal to see if I was going to clear the obstruction, and I had no ill effects. I didn't feel anything at all. So whatever obstruction I had from the first one, that took about a month before it happened. So you can there's some real evidence that things are still moving around, or it takes a few weeks for the gallbladder to get back to its normal shape after the first flush. That obstruction took about a month to happen, and that the second flush did clear the obstruction, because I have felt no ill effects since then. Anytime I would eat vegetarian-based protein when I did have the obstruction, I didn't feel anything, but anytime I ate meat-based protein, it would hurt very badly. And then since the second flush, I've had 3 or 4 meat-based meals and have had no ill effects. So whatever obstruction was there was cleared, and now I know what to look for. So if this happens again, if I start feeling that again, then I know, okay, I have another obstruction, and I can prepare for the next flush. So I am planning to continue this process. I know it's going to take a year or so to go through it. It's a long commitment to make sure you clear out all this. But the main thing is, I noticed after the first one, I'm able to exercise and recover much more quickly. Whatever problems I was having with energy levels and circulation have gone away. I feel great, and I'm actually feeling 10 years younger than I was before this all started. When I started this in July, I was 205 pounds, and I'm now, I weighed in last week at 188, so I've lost 20 pounds, and feel fantastic. And so I'm looking forward to continuing this process through. I know it is a long journey, but it has completely turned my life around, and I feel so grateful because of the way I grew up being active. I was starting to get very disappointed that my activity levels had to really reduce because of the way that my body was reacting to activity. And so going through this process has given me back that part of my life, which is so important.